Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this virtual professional development opportunity. My name is Joe Schmidt, and I'm the Social Studies Specialist for the Maine Department of Education. This afternoon, I am happy to welcome back Jamie Carafa from Bruce M. Whittier Middle School in RSU 16. Jamie is one of my teacher leaders, having completed the cohort 2 years ago now? 3 years ago now?
Yeah.
Time flies, something like that. Jamie has been back on multiple occasions to share her knowledge and expertise on all things middle school social studies. And today she's here to share her capstone work regarding the Electoral College and Maine's role in it that she had just recently completed as part of her master's program. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the amazing Jamie to tell you more.
Hi, guys. So to start, if you have any questions, feel free to put the questions into the Q&A section. Joe will interrupt me and just say, hey, so-and-so wants to know this. No problem with that whatsoever. But if you feel like you want to know something right away, just shoot it out there. So my name is Jamie. I teach in Poland, Maine. I've been teaching since 2005, not here in Poland, Maine. But right now I'm an 8th grade social studies teacher. So I recently finished my master's in American history and government at Ashland University in Ashland, Ohio. If any of you are interested in getting your master's at all in anything government or history related, I highly recommend you check out Ashland. They created their master's program for teachers. So basically during the school year, you can be online and then you're on campus over the summer. So it's made in a way that's very doable for teachers. And you don't need to be there all summer, every summer or anything like that, but you just have to go on campus a certain amount of time. I also wanted to share that, so in order to get my master's, I am the James Madison Fellowship of Maine for 2015. If you're not familiar with the James Madison Fellowship, basically they choose one social studies teacher in each state. They pay for their master's in some sort of constitutional study. And you must teach the Constitution in some way. Like I don't teach, government all year long or something like that, but I do teach about some Supreme Court cases and stuff like that. So that's why I'm able to justify that I do teach the Constitution. And the requirements, you'll end up going to, well, this year it changed because of COVID, but you'll end up going to Georgetown University for 4 weeks in the summer and really diving into the Constitution with some top professors from around the country and travel around to big historic places in and around DC as well. And then basically they pay for everything. The only agreement that you make is that once you finish your master's, you will teach social studies for as long as it took you to get your master's. So if it takes you 3 years, you agree that the next 3 years after you graduate, you will give that time back. The main idea is that they want to enhance teachers' civic understanding to then enhance student civic understanding. And it is something that it is a nonprofit, but it is somewhat connected to Congress. So if anybody has any questions about that James Madison Fellowship or is looking to get their master's, or you hear of somebody looking to get your master's, the James Madison Fellowship is a great way to do it. It's a hard application, but if you're persistent, I think a lot of people will end up getting it, especially in Maine, because it's a small state. And I'm more than welcome or willing to help any of you if you're interested in that. So that's kind of just a basic before I start. So my capstone, I needed to do a capstone project for my master's. And I was like, man, if I'm going to study some big topic and really dive into it, I don't want to just do it to complete it. Like I want to make something worthwhile. So I wanted to make it useful for me, but I also wanted to make it useful for other Maine teachers, because I figured why not dive into something that you may not have time to dive into yourself. So I chose the Electoral College. Honestly, looking back, I'm like, I'm not really sure why. I'm not from Maine, so I wanted to kind of understand why Maine chose to distribute their electors the way they did. And I thought I was going to have this like big learning experience and just come be like, oh, that makes so much sense. And I dove down a lot of rabbit holes and a lot of coincidences and just way things kind of played out. But I learned a ton about the Electoral College. And I was telling Joe right before we started that I was really hoping that at the end I'd be like, oh, well, this is the way we should run the Electoral College because this, and this. And to be honest, after all of my research and creating this project, I don't know that I believe there is one best way for our country in how to distribute electoral votes. So it's a great topic for students because if I myself is kind of like, ooh, I mean, I could see the pros and cons of different areas, but if I myself can't really like choose one avenue and say that's for sure what is best for the country as a whole, then it's a good topic for students to go and investigate and kind of decide. And it's super relevant for Maine, especially with recent presidential elections really coming down to, you know, electoral votes and stuff like that, and being close in certain regions. It's important for the kids to understand how things work in Maine and why they do it that way. So I'm going to share my document with you. All right. And let's see, actually, let me go back in and in the chat, I'm gonna share. I know I shared it before, but I don't know if you can still see that link. So there's the link that I am. Oh wait, I shared it with just panelists. There we go. There's the link to this document. Now, as part of the like actual organization of the capstone, I didn't need to create a lesson. I just had to explain how I was going to create the capstone project. So what I did was I kind of took my project and pieced it together in a way that you could use it if you wanted to. What I decided to do was kind of make my own DBQ with, you know, sources from Maine, outside of Maine, and as I dove in, I kind of learned more and kind of shifted a little bit. So this is kind of the final product. So basically, the focus is Electoral College in Maine and how should states distribute electors. Each one of these blue headings actually is a link to another document. So the first one is the background. If you're familiar with DBQs, I tried to make it kind of look like the way it might look in a DBQ. And this is information that I researched and found myself and put it kind of into my words. So I discussed why was the Electoral College created? How does the Electoral College work? What is the winner takes all method, the district plan method, and the popular vote method? And then what is the history of the Electoral College in Maine? You know, this document alone would be super relevant to Maine students and very useful, absolutely very useful. So that's kind of how I broke it up. One of the things I like to do, and I put this on the lesson thing, is I like to have kids read paragraphs and then create hashtags to kind of like sum up the paragraphs. Obviously there's a heading here, but it really helps you see if they understand what they're reading. So I kind of, it's weird because some kids don't understand hashtags or even know what hashtags are, which is strange because I thought that that's what they do, but not always. So you might have to explain it to them. But sometimes we'll go through and do it that way. In terms of things that I learned, the winner takes all method is the method that most states take. I'm sure if you're familiar with the Electoral College, you know that. Basically, whoever wins the popular vote of the state, all the electors go that way. And most states are that. Maine and Kansas, yeah, sorry. I was drawing a blank. Use what's called the district plan method. I did not know that was the name of it, but that's what I came across in my studies. And that's breaking it up by congressional districts. And then there's also the popular vote method, where I don't think you're going to ever see, this is just my kind of opinion from the study, but I don't think you're going to ever see the Electoral College completely just gone and gotten rid of and just using the popular vote. But there is currently something called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, which is a way that states can actually possibly make the Electoral College null and void by agreeing to be a part of this compact. And what they would do on that compact is they're agreeing to put all of their electors to whatever the national popular vote is. So it would basically become the popular vote would win, but it wouldn't be because there's no electoral college. It's kind of like gaming the system. So those are the three methods that I wanted kids to take a look at. One, because two of those are used today, and three, people talk all about, but why do we have the electoral college still? Why don't we just use a popular vote? What's good about that? So I wanted them to kind of really dive into all three of them. And then the history in Maine. It was actually really hard to research the history of the electoral college in Maine. I did get a hold of a professor who has hardcore studied this, written on this. And so he gave me a lot of feedback, but basically Maine thought the rest of the state was going to be going to this like district plan thing. So they were kind of ahead of the game. They kind of went with it. They thought everybody was going that way, and then nobody went that way. I mean, that's kind of a quick sum up of it. And then it just stuck. And so it's interesting, and it played no role whatsoever because all of our electors went to the same person until the 2016 election. So it's not until recently that the district plan has actually played any role in Maine or like in the national election, or any different than being popular vote. So it has become a bigger deal. I'm sure, as you guys noticed in the last election, we saw a lot of campaigning in one of our congressional districts because it mattered, when it's a tight race. And so I think this has become a topic that our kids really need to understand. Why is Maine different? How does Maine do it? Why are these presidential candidates coming to Maine when we're such a small state in terms of population and even electors? We only have 4. So I think it's just a really important topic for kids to kind of understand. So that's the background. And then the second part is my collection of documents. And this is kind of like the DBQ. I went through and just researched newspapers and journals and talked with people and anything I could find. And so what I did here is I kind of gave you a short sum up of what this is or where it's from. And I only took parts that I thought connected best. I didn't give like full articles. I tried not to. And then I included questions that directly connect to that article to kind of help kids analyze what's in the document. My goal was for this to be middle school because that's what I teach. Talking with my other middle school teacher, she thinks it would take a lot of hand-holding with middle school to go through all of these documents. So it might be better geared for high school. So if you're a high school teacher being like, oh, I don't really want a middle school assignment, I think it could work either place. And I think high schoolers might be able to analyze a little bit better. So just going through this, I'm not going to go through all of these documents, but some articles from the Portland Press Herald. Some of these are not local. I mean, this is also a local one. I tried as hard as I could to find as much from Maine as I could. Again, another local one from Portland Press Herald. This was an editorial in the Portland Evening Express. So I really tried to find just different pieces for kids to take a look at of like, what did Maine think? What did Maine want? What did people say? How did Maine try to do things? Because it's quite fascinating to look at, like Senator Margaret Chase Smith is a very well-known senator, and she played a role in the Electoral College. And so kind of giving them pieces of that. So basically it's just a bunch of documents here and all have leading questions. And back to the original document. Then I created a classroom simulation. I thought it would be really good for students to see how it plays out. Now, obviously it can play out differently, so they may not, it could play out differently in your classroom than it does mine, but I thought it would be important for them to at least see what it's like in action. So I created a simulation that you can use. I'm not going to go through all of it, obviously, but basically the first part is making sure the kids know the 3 methods and understanding what they mean. And then I explained how to divide the class. The groups have to become states, and you have to have different size states and different electoral votes. And then they're going to actually track the votes in their group. And then they're going to track the votes in the class. Here's where they track the winner takes all, the electoral college district plan, and then the popular vote. So no electoral college. I thought rather than have big debates over political candidates and have them arguing and whatever, I would just put it as what is the best baked good, brownies or cookies. And I do teach middle school. There will still be an argument over which is the better baked good, but at least it won't be like focused on politics. It'll be more, and you can get to the bottom of what this will look like. And I'm sure you'll have some kids freak out like, it's not fair, or, you know, this doesn't work that way, or no, we can't do that, based on the different ways that you can vote. There's also some discussion questions. I think it's really important to talk through with them, some pros and cons they notice about both or all of the methods. Also, I think it's important to talk about what's better for smaller and larger states. And then for them, what do they think is most fair? Most likely they're going to choose whatever option fit what they wanted. But I think that's an important concept as well, because, you know, I think a big part of if we're going to change the electoral college is based on what do you want as a person or as your political party? What do they want? What is best for them? I think it's more about that now than anything. And so it is important for kids to kind of choose what's the most fair and why did you choose that? And then going back here, I created an essay outline, you know, nothing special. I kind of, you know, replicated the idea of the DBQ of, okay, here's your, you know, here's your outline. Make sure you explain your support and pull from the documents. And then the last part is just for them to turn that into an essay. So the big question that they're actually focusing on here is, which of the following is the most effective, fair way to run a presidential election? The winner takes all method, the district plan method, or the popular vote method? So that is what kids have to determine from this. And I think even if they're confused at the end, because I myself was confused in a lot of ways, I think that's okay. But I think our kids really need to understand, why do we have the Electoral College? What is it? What purpose does it serve? Why do some people want to get rid of it? Why don't some people want to get rid of it? You know, and I think there's been so much conflict around the Electoral College in the last 21 years, with elections and tight races and the popular vote going one way, but the electoral vote going a different way. I just think it's super relevant right now. And why not take a look back in time of where did it come from? Does it still meet that same purpose? And what do we do moving forward? So I shared that with you guys. If you want to use this in any way, shape, or form, please do so. Use it in any way. You want to change it, have at it. I don't care. I created it for myself to use, but I also want others to be able to use it because, you know, I've really worked hard understanding this all. And so I know as teachers, you don't always have time to do that yourself. So rather than you going and doing all that research, hopefully this will offer something that'll make it easier for you. I also want to share, anytime anybody wants to reach out to me with any questions about this or questions about the Electoral College or any of the places I researched or what I read, feel free always to reach out. I do have copies of the stuff I went through, and I read a lot of journals, more so than books. But anything, feel free to reach out to me. I will add that. I'm going to go ahead and stop my share. I'm going to add that, my email, to the chat. It is jcarafa@rsu16.org. Does anybody have any questions? Have any questions come?
Here's where you display your excellent wait time now. Yep, Faith, let me bring you in. Faith's going to come in live. Okay, Jamie?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Jamie, thank you so much. I think this is a wonderful topic.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, and you're saying that you have no, you're still struggling with this question is, I think is a very strong point, because when it comes to inquiry, I find that in my experience that I got the perhaps the most expansive results from my students when they knew that there was no right answer, and that they really had ownership, and they had credibility in the discussion here. So I think that's fabulous here.
Yeah.
Historically, I find the timeline of 1972 interesting. I was actually in high school when this debate was going on.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about Senator Edmund Muskie, who had been a front runner in the 1972 primaries.
Yep.
Also, Margaret Chase Smith was still in office. And there was a lot of concern at that time that big politics and big business were taking over the elections. Things haven't changed very much. So this idea of trying to Maine leads the nation and getting ahead of the curve, especially in the fact that this was a period of incredible national election reform based upon the 1968 election. And then as we later learned a little bit more in detail, what some of the activities Richard Nixon's reelection campaign were engaging in order to get a favorable election result as well.
Yeah, and I mean, that time period obviously came up a lot in the study of Electoral College. And, that was the closest we ever came to getting rid of it, the Electoral College. And from what I researched, it was because really it was a bipartisan effort. It did end up failing in the Senate, I believe, but it was a bipartisan effort. But now, since like the election of 2000, it's become more of a political party thing. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think, that's why I said that I don't think we'll ever see it get gone, because I don't think you'll ever see Republicans and Democrats come together in agreement, because at this point, one way kind of benefits Democrats and one way kind of benefits Republicans, or at least that's kind of the view. I'm not going to say that that's actually true, but it's just kind of like the viewpoint since the 2000 election. So I don't think, and from what I studied, most people agree that I don't think we'll ever get rid of it because of that. So 1972 is really interesting because it was really the real chance we had to get rid of it, if people think we should. But yeah, thanks for chiming in on that.
Right, and your point is well taken about the recent elections, because there have been 5 presidential elections where the popular vote went to the person who did not win the Electoral College vote, and one being in 2016, and then even though it wasn't determined this way, but we were very close in the year 2000. Just not to dominate the discussion, but I'm wondering if you had a chance to follow up with your students after the events of January 6th at the Capitol building. If we did not have the Electoral College, could this have some way been avoided?
So that's a great question. I actually created this in the last couple of months. Well, I guess since January, and I taught the election during November. So I haven't used this with my students. I will be using it next school year. So I haven't, of course we talked about that topic in general, but not in comparison with this. But I think that is a great way to connect current events to this idea too, of like, what things could we avoid or make better if we changed it? Or can we not make things better by keeping it the same, And I think that's why I really got stumped on my own answer, because like, I can tell you which way is better according to recent elections, which way favors Democrats, which way favors Republicans. I can say which way favors small towns versus big cities. I could tell you the different ways that could, like, what would help which region over this region, or who would get more attention during elections if we change it this way versus this way. And there's so many different, like, there's just so many variables. And that's why I say that, like, I don't know that I have an exact answer, because I don't know who I think, like, I have my own political beliefs, and yeah, I would love it to go the way that I want it to go, but is that really best for the country? And, you know, who do I think should get more attention? Should it be the small states? Should it be the big cities? Like, you know, I don't know. And so, like, there's just so many variables. And I think that's the good part of this inquiry, but also like the discussions you can have with kids, because there's not a right answer. You can back any of the answers, but there's not, like, I don't think anybody could truly tell me and convince me that this is the way it has to go, because that is the best for everyone, because of this, because of this, because of this, because of this. Because every option has a con somewhere. So yeah, thank you for asking questions. I see that Melanie had a question. Oh. Joe?
Yep, Melanie said, I may have missed this, but how long do you spend on this with your kids in class? How much class time?
Again, I have not used this yet, because I did all of my research and created this project after I had already taught the election this year. And because a capstone is not organized like a lesson plan, I never actually created a lesson plan for it all. I created the parts that they needed, and then I had to write an essay about all of this as well. So what I would say is that, you know, kind of make a guess. I mean, I think you could spend a week on this. I think you could spend a month on this, or a couple weeks, you know, and if you're like, well, I don't really want to spend that much time, maybe you just pull from the documents and have them investigate them while you're talking about the Electoral College. Or maybe use the background just so they have an understanding of the basics of it. So unfortunately, I don't have a really good answer for that, because I haven't used it myself. I do think, as I said, that if you did the whole assignment with middle schoolers, I think you'd have to spend a lot of time going through those documents with them. I think they would really need you to go through them. And normally when I do documents, I let them do them in pairs or groups. And then I come back as a group and do it as a whole, just to make sure that kids that have no idea what the documents are about, they have a better understanding. But that could be a really slow process if, you know, if your middle schoolers just aren't there. We personally spend a lot of time investigating documents in our classes at Whittier. So they've got a little bit of experience with it, but until I've actually done this with my kids, I don't know if these are good documents for middle schoolers, need more hand holding, or better geared for high school. I won't know until I try it with the kids. So thank you for the question. Any other questions or comments? Thanks, Joe, for making my fixing my question. It's Nebraska and Maine, not Kansas. I don't know where I went there, but it's in all of my work too. It does say Nebraska, I promise. All right.
Any questions for Jamie? Last call, and any questions for Jamie? Well, Jamie, thank you for sharing your expertise and time and passion on the Electoral College and the implications here in Maine, and for sharing the resource that you put together for everybody. We thank you again, as always.
Yeah, and anybody welcome, you're welcome to share these with others too. Definitely, I have no problem with any of that. I'd love for people to use this information. So thanks, Joe.